about for the other ladies? Okay, so the first screening, of course, we look at the strengths and gifts, which was if y'all looked at the video, is really interesting comments from the parents that they didn't know about their child's gifts and strengths. And I really want to tell you, there's one parent, they lived in Jacksonville, Florida, that the mom sent her son to a really extensive dyslexia school. And I said, I sent you this gifts and strengths checklist, but knowing that they've already told you all these gifts and strengths about your son. She said, no. So even one of the best, probably dyslexia schools, they got my best dyslexia schools in the country, they don't even share the gifts and strengths. So it was really the gifts and strengths. Oh my gosh, if I would have had it when I was young and it's made, what y'all saw, what they get back after filling out the checklist, it's visual for the child and they can talk about it. If I would have had that, I would have realized gifts and strengths. I didn't think I could do anything well. But I did find out my mom put me in art classes and interpretive dance because she didn't have an idea or inkling that those were supposed to be my gifts and strengths. But even those didn't take because they had such an academic sense that I didn't even think I could do those well. So just imagine if I developed all those gifts all those years.
Right.
I would have been further along, but it's okay because it all had happened the way it's happened. Right?
Right.
Right. So today, this anger shame checklist is number 2 on the screenings because I thought if they get the first one, it should be gifts and strengths. The second one's heavier. It should be the anger and shame, which is our Linda and I's acronym for it because it's actually got an official name of My Albert Learning Uniquenesses, the ultimate SEL, which stands for Social Emotional Learning Checklist, sympathetic impairment. So we just call it anger shame checklist for short.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, if they would have talked to me about my anger and how to replace it with strength and shame, they could have helped me early on to identify that with empathy. I think I would have been further along social emotionally, because the biggest impact, of course, was where I thought it was the learning. It wasn't. It was my relationships with people, my relationships with God. It was my relationships with myself that were obviously way more important, but nobody talked to me about how I was feeling angry or shame. Nobody. No. My mom held me and said, I'm so sorry. This is so hard for you, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, they just didn't, I guess, early 80s is when I was diagnosed at least, that they just didn't talk about anger and shame. And, we still don't talk about anger and shame enough today because that podcast that I was on, you need to notice he was trying to veer off of anger and shame and I wouldn't let him. I was bringing him back to it. Nobody wants to look at anger or shame. Nobody. But, I know the Bible well, and I know, Adam and Eve and everything, and I know Jesus came to save us from this suffering, but I read 2019, the CDC said 11% of people in America are depressed.
Right.
And so that's to me, that's grief and hatred. That's that deep anger and shame. That's that cloud. That's that fog. That's that heaviness. That's that non-light. So yes, he came to save us and he's coming again and we'll probably never experience any of this again. But I don't want people, I want people to be aware of their anger and shame. They might not be able to heal it. They might be not meant, that's not where they are in their process of growing with God. I don't know, but at least they're aware. At least they have a checklist to say that they could be aware of it. And that's what this is. So it's sent to the parents. Yep, this is sent to the parents. So what happens is they say they want an evaluation from me, right? So I text them the link to the first checklist, which is the strengths and gifts and strengths, and I text them this one, and I get it back from him, and I send them back a not Canva, a sway on it, and I speak to them about it. And then I do my learning difference checklist, which is the next Tuesday that I'm going to show y'all. But this is done by them on their own, and they hear back from me. And so I've got completed 6 of these so far, but I've done literally probably 48 total, but I didn't have it on this format. So, because Linda said it was too complicated on the PDF form, that I needed to do it this way, that this one is, I've only done 6 of these, and that was last week. That was last week.
Wow.
Yeah, I did 6. So they fill this out, meaning I get these back to them. So the first one for anger, it says, do you react when someone is correcting you or giving advice? That's defensive. Okay. So I'm getting a lot of sometimes back on this from kids on all these anger ones. So I have to make a point about that. The parent gets a say in this, and the teacher, because I've met with the teacher on all the ones that were on the PDF form, never with this one, but I've met with the teacher and on these two. And so everybody gets a say on, so I can tell you how to work with a parent and teacher on these when the child is saying sometimes when we know it's always. Okay. So when the child says sometimes, and you know it's always, I go, really? And I'll say, well, I've seen you get defensive when I mention blah, blah, blah. And anyway, and so I'll say it in front of the child just like that. And the child's like, and the teacher's like, yeah, you do. And, I've seen you do this example and this example of it. And so then we all say, well, should we keep it sometimes or should we put it always? And guess what? The child will go, yeah, let's put it always. Right. Now, also, if you think about it, what if they put always when it's a never? Well, guess what that is? If they say always and it's a never, it's just a cry out for help. That's just a cry out for help.
Okay.
So you can never, so you basically, this is the perfect example of also trusting the child and their answers. So you don't argue with them when they're saying always when it's a never. You listen to them, and you can go back and forth between always and sometimes if you think it's logically where you could, but I would just go with the always, because that's just a cry out for help, saying always when it's never. But you have to make sure they understand the vocabulary, always, never, sometimes, which they do. Because remember, I don't work with kids that are under 7, like 2 or 3. So I'm gonna read a few more. Do you speak or act without thinking first? Impulsive. Let's say if they need an example of impulsive, okay? Because they're 7 and not 16 taking this, or they're not an adult.
Okay.
And this is all in the learning environment. Of course it is. I didn't tell you all that, but of course it is. This is all in the learning environment related. I'm not talking about home and with siblings. So yeah. It could be at home working homework. It's anything in the learning environment. So, do you speak or act without thinking first? Impulsive. So they said, what does that mean? What do you mean? I say, well, do you working on something really hard, what you're writing, and then you all of a sudden just crumple up and throw it across the room? That's impulsive. And then I can tell them I did that. There's a lot of I did that to make them feel better. Now, so really, I've probably done over 50 of these now, from PDF to these, that are in this format. And I've only had one bad situation, only 1 out of 50 bad situation. And it was when a dad, yeah, because it's such a sensitive topic, big trigger for people, talking about anger and shame, because it's generational anyway. And that's what I'm trying to do, is help in generational anger and shame. A dad was listening and he got mad and angry. We finished it though. And then the mom texted me later, I'm sorry, he got so angry. And of course I can expect it because I just said it's generational anger. I'll say, and so I handled all that, but I've
Wow.
only had one sticky bad situation, and I knew it would be going in because hyperactive. The mom speaks hyperactive, the child hyperactive is anger. So there was a lot of anxiousness all the time in their environment anyway. Hypoactive is shame. That's the
Yeah.
lethargic. That's the shame. So anyway, do you react by breaking or hurting someone or something when you're upset or feel unsafe? So I didn't really ever break or hurt anything or someone because I was raised. So your environment has a lot to do on how you how you act upon your anger or shame. But I know this is gross, but I have to give you all this example. I did pick my scat. I was a picker. And that was my anxiousness. That's that anger. I have scars from where I picked. I don't know. Have y'all ever known that about kids? The
My
picking
daughter pulled out her eyelashes.
eyelashes, same. Yep, same exact. Hmm.
Yeah. And
So
she, yeah.
that would go under this because yeah, that would go under hurting yourself or some. It doesn't put yourself, but we know that goes under that. And it's because I felt unsafe. Um, and I was. Do you get physical with your classmates, hitting and violence? Okay, so what was interesting is go through the results for a second on these 6 responses on the graph that it makes. A lot of kids did all of these: sweating, overwhelmed, nervous. Now, I have to say calm. That's why one of my Albert classes is remembering calm. Is good for anger and shame. It's calming, it's getting in tune with, it's the brain balancing, it's getting in tune with your mind, it's being in the present, all of that. So that will be the best thing for that one right there as well. Albert has lots of activities. Do you think other things during a lesson or activity? Poor focus. Yes, so a lot of people might not know this, but poor focus is anger and attention is shame. And attention is daydreaming, and we'll see that one.
Oh gosh, that's my middle
Like
name.
anxious. What?
Daydreaming. That's my middle name.
Oh,
Spent
well,
most of my childhood daydreaming instead of
yeah,
getting ready for school. Instead
you
of
were
doing what I was supposed to be
you were
doing.
in the past or the present, not in. I mean, past or the future. You weren't in the present.
Oh, the future for sure.
Yeah, me too. Do you have difficulty going or staying asleep? Do you struggle with remembering facts? I'm going to go fast now. Do you feel like people are but this is my most important checklist of all. So, do you feel like people are talking about you or someone is out to get you? That's for older teens, or adults. Do you have lots of energy and can't sit still, hyperactive? Do you have does your mind, does your have mind race? Does your mind race? Hyperactive. Okay. Do sounds bother you? Hypersensitive. Does your clothing bother you? Hypersensitive. Comments. Okay. Now we're on to shame. So if I would have had this when I was young, I would have had hardly any anger marked. Just the ones at the very bottom of this list. Because again, your environment is training you on how to act in society. So I wasn't taught to hit out or hit anything or lash out.
Mhm.
And I wasn't even talked about at all about my anger. So anger turns to shame.
Yeah.
So you actually want more on a child that's younger, especially. You want a lot of anger marked because that means somebody is recognizing their natural feelings of anger and they're able to express them in the way that people naturally express them, that we want to get them to do a different, we want to revert that to different emotion, which would be strength and act out in a healthier way, right? So you actually do want to see a lot of anger marked if you're going to see any. You don't want to see a lot of shame marked on a young child. But guess what? Nobody talked to me about my anger, so I had tons of shame. Shame is deeper inside the brain, and it affects more of your learning, and it's harder for people to notice because you keep it inwardly. There's little hints and clues, of course, I'll try to mention as we go through the checklist that can give you clue to having shame. But again, anger is so much easier to observe and see. And so unfortunately, I probably would have had most shame checklists, and I would have needed more empathy for myself. Now, why do we have anger and shame? It's to, again, an unsafe, unhealthy environment that's not meeting our needs. It's our way of feeling safe until it stops working. Anger and shame, it works for people until it stops working. But that's why you have to give them the tools to be able, when they're ready, because only they can look at their anger and shame and be able to want to heal it. Even as a young child, they're going to have to still want to heal it, right? Because that's the soul saying, I want to heal this now. But you're still going to you can still model and give clues, tools and all that, but even if they're not ready to look at it, but and explore it. But where was I going? I don't know. I'm just going to start. I was going somewhere important. Do you ever feel as though you can't move forward during or after a lesson, feeling stuck or shut down? Yep, so that would have been probably always for me. Do you break pencils or tear paper? Do you play video games a lot? Numbing. Now, so I kind of remember, I don't remember tearing paper, breaking pencils. But I don't remember I can't honestly remember what numbing activities I did. But I know this video is just for us. For teens, it could be drinking, binge drinking. That's a numbing activity. Yep. So you have to think about how this question applies to younger kids, like tearing up pencils and erasers all over the place for numbing. And that sends them to a state of not being where they are presently. By the way, that's what numbing does. It gets you somewhere else so you're not having to think about your shame. See, in video games, that's all ages of kids nowadays, but you have to think about the numbing for older teens and people. It's usually addictive type behaviors, or binge drinking, or binge smoking, those types of things. That's what I did. Remember, I told y'all in my bio, started drinking in high school because that's the only way I could deal with feeling safe, not feeling unsafe in an unsafe environment of college, basically, too, is where I'd reference that. That was all that shame. So the shame had me to forget my shame. I was doing numbing. But I forgive myself. I'm good about it now. I don't feel guilty for that. I don't feel grief for that. Basically, because remember, shame turns to grief as you get older. And anger turns to hatred. So you have to read my biography thingy. Do you tend to think about yourself and your needs rather than others, self-centered? So this for shame was very interesting to me, because how many times have I told y'all, people with neurodifferences, we care about people, animals, nature more than anything, right? We do. It's on so many of the things that they say about being a gift. We really do. We're so sensitive. We're so empathetic, and um, and so intuitive. But anyway, so we care a lot about those things, but yet we're self-centered, and so that's where I would manipulate. And why did I manipulate so much with my crying, especially? Does anybody know the answer? Of course, it's just you, Susan, but we're on a video, so everybody. You want to know why? I finally came to know why.
Yeah, why?
Because it was a cry out for help for that shame, is that self-centeredness. I wasn't healing it, and I didn't know how.
Yeah.
But I don't manipulate with tears anymore, or crying, and don't become the victim anymore, because I've healed a lot of this, what Jesus had, but that's for off the camera, I guess. I don't know. Do you choose not to communicate with people self-centered? So this is where, uh, again, this person, do I want to keep that there? Hold on. Okay. Yeah. So when it came to the feelings I felt about not having these terms, anger, shame, empathy, strength, when it came too hard and too deep and my shame came too much, I would go inside myself for help and and not, I'd just like go to I stopped communicating about it altogether. So kind of like went inwardly. That was mostly in college. Do you ever choose to not interact with your classmates, isolating? So I did do some isolating. Yep, still back to college again. There was a lot of shame in college, and if you read my bio, you'll see mm, college was hard. Do you have problems with I'm talking about the first college, talking about early childhood at Auburn when I was younger. Do you have problems with phonetic sounds, sounding out, short-term memory? So I'd said that shame is deeper inside the brain. So is your short-term memory, because it's attached with your limbic system, which is attached to your emotions and your redirecting of those emotions, reassessing of those emotions. So when you're in shame, you're working with your emotional body, not your mental body. You're just in an emotional state. So it does affect your short-term memory. Now, speaking of being healed of almost all this anger and all this shame, and but now I'm an adult, so it's hatred and grief, and being replaced with compassion and courage. When I still revert back to any of these emotions that I say is energy residue of emotions of anger and shame or hatred and grief, is when I'm sick, hungry, tired, or stressed. I still will revert, and I'll still show some of my dyslexic characteristics when I'm still at any point of any of those. It's way less, way less often, and also I'm able to help it better. Just FYI on that. Do you usually need help with tasks? Oh, I was so needy, guys. Oh my gosh, it wasn't even funny. So needy. Or withdrew, Well, I knew I could trust. I couldn't trust to get help, but I was needy. Do you cry easily? So yes. Do I cry easily now? No, I got so much strength now, but I cry at the drop of a hat. Now the most grief-stricken adult that I worked with with a neurodifference, man, she'd cry over everything, and I just wanted to say, did pray with her, God, please take this grief and replace it with compassion. But man, that's a big one, and a lot of kids. So this one's hard for kids though, because younger they are, the less experienced they are in reassessing their emotions and turning their emotions into something positive, like empathy. So you got to say, if it's crying, is it related to your learning? So this one you got to be careful on, not to just because they're young. Do you
Right.
revisit thoughts over and over again, ruminating? So this would have been always. So again, Susan, we talked about I was totally in the future or the past. The future was always bright. I've always been a half full person. When I think of my past, how was somebody's tone when they were speaking to me? What was the look on their face? What was the body gesture? What were they saying that I was taking to heart to believe that was true about myself that was actually very untrue? See? So ruminating was huge, and that has a lot to do with shame. Shame is living in those two places. And if you read my part 1 of my program, it explains the hippocampus that talks about where you are in space and time. And I was very much not in the present through my shame. But now I get more president. I get more president. Added a syllable in the middle position. So it's more than one sound. Okay, so do you avoid people or things? So let me just say too, me doing that to a word. So I was having some trauma thinking of this, ruminating my negative thoughts. That's why that came out,
I see.
feeling some of that shame. And that's why I do my
Yeah.
stumbling over my words and all of those characteristics.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you avoid things? That's avoidance. Are you always afraid to learn new things? The interesting thing about this part of the brain and shame and everything is we're actually extremely adventurous. The shame one is the one that's the most adventurous too. But if it's something that they think they're gonna fail at, they will not do. They're naturally they're fighting themselves in the fact that they're actually very adventurous and want to do everything and experience the world. But they also will not do something if they think they're going to fail at it. That's not me anymore. Speaking to y'all right now, right? Can you remember phone numbers? So I love this short-term memory thing in shame because the sweetest child I have is the most shame, has the most shame. She's the sweetest one I have, and she's always checking to see if I'm all right. Remember, if you have shame, you're extremely caring towards other people, animal, and nature. And she's most worried about, I'm sorry. Did I do this? I'm sorry. No, it's fine. It's okay. No, don't worry. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. Say she has the hardest time with her short-term memory. And that reminds me of my shame because she can only hold 4 syllables in her mind and symbols. She can only hold 4 symbols in her mind, and she's as old as the other kids that are doing that phonological awareness, that mind that with holding words in their mind. She's as old as the other kids in there. She's got the most shame. So your short-term memory is in the deepest part of your brain, and that's right there. And so we did it as, can you remember your phone number? Because phone numbers are usually 8 digits, so they're gonna all mark no on phone number. Let's see, but that's a good way of knowing how many numbers do you know. Actually, let me put that. How many numbers do you know? Because 4 at age 11 is not good. Because that's where I was. I was at 4. How many?
And I'm sorry, that's an indicator of shame.
Those are all. We moved from anger to shame when we moved up here. The first
Right.
shame one was feeling stuck, and then it was numbing, and then self-centered, and self-centered, and then isolating.
Okay.
Short-term memory. Long-term memory is anger. If you're anger dominant, we had to talk about shame dominant means mostly checked marked. Shame dominant is mostly check mark for shame. Shame. Anger dominant is mostly check mark for anger. You could have both. Mark both dominant on anger and shame. That's total functioning dominance. Anger and shame functioning dominance. Now, out of the 50 something kids, how many did I have that were both anger and shame? I had a lot. And it's mostly on sometimes, not on always. But if you don't address the anger and shame, you could get to where it's always on all of them. If it's not addressed, it's just going to keep on compounding until you get this anger and shame fixed. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Do you daydream? That's what I said, where shame is inattention, daydreaming, feel tired, sluggish, hypoactive. Does your mind work slowly? So I had the most shameful of shame, more than that little girl that I'm talking about. It was a 16-year-old boy. He was adopted, and so was his siblings. And he came to me tired and sluggish, just like where she'd ever seen. His mind worked so slowly, and it was like that constantly. So he had generational shame that I can't even imagine, through his real parents, the ones he probably never met. So I'll never forget him. Never forget him. Do you want to hold things in your hand or need pressure on your body? Hypersensitive. So, so those that need pressure. Here, questions for the observer and comments from the coach. And I know what, I need to add something up when we get off. So it's 2 till 9. I can go over this, or we can stop. And we would look at the responses from real, because this is also on online. You want me to share it and not go over this? You have. What do you want me to do, Susan? You want me to? I couldn't.
I mean, I have a couple more minutes, but how much? Share the graph. Share the graphic.
Yeah. You see it?
We're zoomed in a little bit too much, probably. I can see most of it.
So out of the 6 responses, it says, so I have a never for defensive. So
okay.
This makes me think that because I handed this to parents and didn't explain to them that you have also an influence on how this goes, they probably left it to just the child. I'm just saying we have probably a lot more defensive kids than sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh, no. I mean, never. More defensive than never. So that has a lot to do with me not preparing them as well as I should have. That's those little fine details I need somebody to help me with, that I have a hard time because I'm so big picture,
Yeah.
Do you speak or act without thinking first? Impulsive? Never. And then I got a sometimes. I'm 33. So when I coached them through this, they look way different. There's a lot less sometimes and more always. So it's interesting when I explain things versus with the PDF, I sat with them and did the PDF with them. This, they're just getting on their own and they're filling it out, not being really coached on it. Because it's kind of self-explanatory. So I need to do a better job because I think it's altering the data a little bit. But just because I know from the other ones that are PDF, but they're still interesting and it definitely gives a lot of insight.
Yeah. And so when you begin to tutor them, this just helps you understand how to communicate with them in a more effective way, or how they're probably going to react to new concepts, or
everything.
This just
everything is affected by anger and shame. The whole brain, the whole body, everything, because it's an energy, and we're all energy. So it's like a cloud. It's like a negative energy that's inside the brain that I can see. I told you I could see it. So then I had to say, why am I seeing this? So I did all the research. So that's part 1 of Elbert that talks about all that inner anger and shame affect every part of us, who we are, how we learn, and how we interact with other people.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I know it sounds crazy and alternative and holistic, but you know what? What we're doing presently is not working. People are suffering. Kids are suffering.
Right.
But it does affect how you do your lesson. And you're very aware now that they could be having pounding heart, sweating, overwhelming feelings, nervousness. When I give examples in it, twirl their hair is a form of stimming. You see if they have the scars on their body from picking. You might not see them pick. You see them hyperactively move their leg. You need to get them calm because they're not going to be able to learn. Because remember,
right.
So a calm child learns. A happy child learns. We all know that. Like, that instinctively. Linda knows that instinctively.
Right.
calm child really learns because the brain is ready and open, and it gets all into part one of why. I gotta read part
Right.
one. It's really hard, isn't it? Oh, I think, yeah, I don't know how
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I think I need to take this assessment.
Yep. Okay, I'm gonna go to, and I'm gonna share some stuff with you. The Bible study that I'm working on, the workbook, the brain balancing.
Okay.
About that. Okay.
Okay.
Bye. Bye.
Well, bye.
Bye.
Talk to you later.